How do you expand time? In other words, get more done in the day. That's exactly what we're talking about today on the Manifesting Guide. But just before we do that, if you'd like to tame your dragons of distraction so you can get the most important things done, please join us in July for a free training. Link will be in the show notes. This is Aryana Rollins with the Manifesting Guide, and this is episode 66, Expanding Time, Strategies to Create Your Power Schedule. So in this podcast, I'm going to cover three things. If you resist planning and scheduling, we're going to talk about what's going on. And then second, how to boost your productivity by creating a power schedule. And three, how do we become as efficient as we can naturally be? Okay, let's first look at what's going on if you resist planning and scheduling like I used to. So, do you ever find yourself writing down your to-do list and doing everything but what you wrote down? I've been there. Do you resist sticking to a schedule? It's almost as if you take the time to plan things out, maybe a project, and you prefer to go with your flow. Well, I used to do that as well, and sometimes I can still find myself doing that. So sometimes if we've got some resistance to sticking to a schedule, it can be, if you're an entrepreneur, it's like, gosh, I got a boss, and the boss is my schedule. And then we can end up doing everything else but what was on our to-do list. And maybe if you end your day wondering where the time went or beating yourself up for not doing the things that was most important to you, this topic is going to be really important. So we're going to talk about beginning the skill of expanding time so you can get magic amounts done in a shorter time. So back to when I first started working for myself, I admit to resisting planning and following a schedule. I did not do it. I seriously didn't. I would create a schedule, but I wouldn't follow it. And I remember one day I missed a client call because I refused to write it down in my calendar. And then the second time it happened, this must have been 15 years ago, I was like, wait a minute, there is something seriously going on here. It's like I just wanted to be in an intuitive flow, and I didn't want that projecting into, oh, my days tied up with this or that, because the creativity would flow in me if I had in my mind an open schedule. I don't know if you can relate to that. Now, as a former project manager, I was pretty good at planning a schedule and sticking to it. But as an entrepreneur, I didn't want my creativity or intuition squashed, so I ran my day by what inspired me, or what was urgent, or came across my desk that day. Now, some days were great. I would get a lot done. Other days, I felt like I was caught in this spinning wheel. And when I finished my work up, I'd look back and see that the only thing I had successfully accomplished was avoiding doing the important things on my to-do list. Ouch! Now I have a great way of tracking my to-do list, and more often than not, I follow it. And I notice I'm more relaxed and I have more free time because I trust the schedule. I trust that I've planned it out and there's enough white space in it. And we're going to talk about your power schedule in a little bit. One of the things that I also became aware of is that I stopped wasting my emotional fuel by fretting about what I had to do next. Because if I overscheduled myself, it's like I didn't have a moment to breathe. And my productivity has gone up, and I end my day feeling as relaxed and peaceful as I started it. Again, that was not always the way it was, but I cleared a lot of the resistance to setting a schedule and trusting myself, trusting the schedule, especially when it's my power schedule, which we'll talk about that in a moment. So number 2, let's move into how to boost productivity by creating your power schedule. So what is a power schedule? It's a term I came up with. It's a schedule you can stick to that doesn't squash your creativity. Why do we need it? Well, let's consider the consequence, the cost of not sticking to a schedule. Do you miss deadlines? Do you miss out on opportunities? Do you drag out finishing projects? And we know if we don't finish the project, we don't get the money. We don't make money from it. And it's always pending in our unconscious mind. We gotta do it, gotta do it, gotta do it. You know what that's like. If you've ever had to finish your tax return, it's like always in the back of your mind, even if you're trying to watch a movie or relaxing, it's looming like this big cloud over your head. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about an exercise that is in my upcoming book, The Manifesting Guide. And it's a way that we can turn up the fire on ourselves to leverage change, so we can recognize the cost of that pattern, the cost of continuing the way we have been continuing, and really recognize how it undermines our success. So I'd like to do a little bit of that with you today. So if you're someone who consistently misses deadlines and drags projects out until you're so deflated you lose the passion for what it was, you'll want to listen. Now we know how to use the time we have. We know how we use our time in the day is a huge indicator of our longer term success. We build one day to the next, 1 month to the next, 1 year to the next. Now, you probably have met someone who seems to get a huge amount accomplished, and you may have wondered what drives them. How do they do it? Well, consider this analogy. If you don't have a clear idea of what you want to accomplish in your day, it's like getting in the car with no direction. You don't have a map, you haven't programmed the address where you need to be driven to or where you're driving to. Let's think about an average day. If you start your day without direction, at least the top 3 things that you'd like to at least begin, if not complete, it's a recipe for dissatisfaction and frustration. And let alone having to carry over your to-do items to the next day, which can result in another entire day of overwhelm and meltdown because the list gets too big. I can't stress that enough, how it made me feel to move over all the tasks the next day. And sometimes early on, before I started using my productivity hacks, is that these pages went over, my to-do list went over 2 to 3 pages. And I got overwhelmed by just looking at the list. And I felt defeated, couldn't even begin. Or I'd scan through and I'd say, oh, well, that one, I'm kind of excited about that. I'll do that. Or that's an easy one. And doing things by what's easiest or what emotionally inspires us is a recipe for disaster, especially if there are some meaningful things you want to get done, projects that you'd like to get done in this lifetime, maybe even this year. So another reason we might want to create a power schedule and stick to it is that we stop wasting time. We have heard this before, that most of 95% of what we get done in our day comes from the mastery of our unconscious mind. We are basically living on autopilot, which means we do things in the same way. And that's a good thing, right? Especially if it's an automation like driving a car. We don't have to think about driving in a car anymore. That's a success pattern. But then we have what I like to call dragons of distractions. These are unconscious patterns that have us checking email, voicemail many times a day rather than sticking to a schedule to review it when it's convenient for us and at a time in our day when we don't need high focusing and creativity. We can check email and listen to voicemails rather blindlessly, effortlessly. But if we do easy tasks at a time when we are most switched on, like for me is early in the morning, that's the most energizing part of my day, it's really wise for us to know when our productive time is and schedule those things that are the hardest for us. Here's an excellent quote by Mark Twain. And he said, "If you have to eat a live frog, do it first thing in the morning, and nothing worse will happen to you for the rest of the day." Well, this productivity method called Eat the Frog method is a great way to organize and tackle your daily task list. I'm not suggesting eating a frog, but I am suggesting picking those things that you will feel good about having started or accomplished at the end of the day. That kind of feeling like, ooh, yay, I did it. You know it. You've done it before. Because when we do the tough stuff first, we get it done. It fuels and builds our confidence, so we're more lit the rest of the day, rather than dreading the next task. Or, worse, putting it off to the next day, the next day, the next day. That feels terrible, right? It impacts our confidence, our well-being. So scheduling something and loosely sticking to it. If you find yourself at least initiating it, you don't have to complete it. At least you've kept your agreement to yourself. You are in integrity. Let's address when a dragon of distraction, what I like to call an unconscious habit pattern, is active. Here are some signs of conflict, such as, if you feel this, just start to notice, what am I putting off? What am I avoiding? And is there a dragon of distraction making choices for you? Here's the list. This is not complete, but these are some good ones to notice. If suddenly you get tired, or you're irritated, impatient, frustrated, you feel overwhelmed, maybe you've got a instant headache, maybe you're having trouble breathing, or you're tense, or you've got indigestion, just body aches. Those are messages from your unconscious mind that you're not aligned, you're not in harmony. Your conscious and unconscious minds are kind of going in two different directions. So your conscious mind says, we really got to do this, and the unconscious mind says, nah, I want to watch a movie on Netflix. And so we get pulled apart. Now, another sign that we have a dragon of distraction running, or an unconscious habit pattern, is when something takes way longer than what we anticipate it should. And we've planned for it, but it's like we just can't get clarity. We can't make a decision, and we're in that spinning wheel. I laugh, but it was painful. I was doing that with the subtitle of the book, The Manifesting Guide. I won't tell you how long I struggled with it, but just this weekend I realized, wait a minute, I'm on alert here. This has taken way too long, and I recognized I had a dragon of distraction running. Now, this one was really clever because it had me analyzing things, using all these great co-scheduling, analyzing your headline software online. I probably did 50 different subtitles. And I never once checked in with myself. Which one did I really feel was aligned with the content of the book? I would go with this clever title, Chat GPT and all, but let's not go there, because I finally settled on one, because I cleared the blocker. I cleared that dragon of distraction. I resolved it, and I kid you not, within one day I had settled upon the best subtitle that I had been fretting around. I can't even admit to you how long. It's so embarrassing because I teach this stuff, but still, I'm not perfect. Okay, so let's go into number 3. How do we become as efficient as we naturally can be? How do we work with our nature and not force or be subject to unfortunate patterns? My favorite way is to understand myself and know what's right for me, and then work with and train my unconscious mind to follow my command, to follow my lead, because I'm in charge. It's like, I've got a new puppy and I'm the leader, right? This dog is 6 months old. Left to its own devices, it's going to do whatever it wants. Chew my foot, chew my desk, run around, not walk on a leash. You know what puppies do, right? But that's like our body as the storehouse of our unconscious mind. It's going to do whatever it wants to do. We've got to train it. We've got to be commanding it. So we know if you're self-employed, or even if you're working for someone, there's all sorts of opportunities for exposure. Like if for a self-employed person, you can grow your audience, grow your list, grow your income through this marketing or that marketing strategy. And we know there's no one-size-fits-all method for success, but we keep hoping and looking for it since we want time freedom, money freedom, and efficiency. So what to do? Well, it's a little bit about your power schedule. I'm going to go into a bit more detail on this, but I'm not going to be able to teach the full power schedule within the podcast, but I want to pique your interest and get you started on it. So first, write down all your pending and open projects, maybe even things you have to make decisions on. Second, rate the desirability of them on a 1 to 10 scale. 10 being very desirable, 1 not at all. Remember, desirability can be a low rating if the timing isn't right. Say, for example, you've been wanting to be part of a summit and someone emailed you, you had a conversation, seemed like a great fit, but you put off completing the details that are required for the summit, like the title of your talk, your bio, your headshot, things like that. So as you do these opportunities in the projects, you realize this is a 10 in desirability and I haven't done it yet. That's going to help you with your power schedule, right? So third is commit to it and write it in your power schedule at the time that is most productive for you. Don't put that in like 5 o'clock at night after you've been working with clients all day, because it's not going to be done as well as if you did it during your peak time. Well, maybe your peak time is 5 o'clock. For me, no, because I get up at 5 a.m. every day and I really enjoy the morning time. So for me, it would be as soon as I sit down to work, I would focus my mind on that. So fourth, now if resistance comes up, say you've got a high desirable project, but you're not doing it. You're not even taking the initial steps. This is what I would call a blocker, and I would highly recommend clearing it, because the unconscious pattern will continue to waste our time, will continue to waste our resources. And we all have blocking behaviors and attitudes, and a lot of times they don't really impact us. But for something that's a big, significant opportunity for you, it could waste your energy, your money, time, and resources. And then at the end of the day, you just don't feel good about what you're doing, because that creative life force, your juices are not being fully utilized. You're not living to your potential. So how do you know if a blocker, an unconscious habit pattern, is running? Here's a couple things to look for. If something takes way longer, which I just said, way longer than it should. 2, you put it off, and then when you do it, you're tired and you can't possibly perform well. Or 3, you forget it entirely until the opportunity is gone. Those are just a few signs. How to resolve blockers. I invite you to listen to episode 46, How to Take Your Power Back from Blockers. It's very insightful. All right, so let's start to wrap up. We've covered what's going on if you resist planning and scheduling. 2, how to boost your productivity by thinking about your power schedule, optimal time of day, and the most desirable projects. And 3, how do we become as efficient as we naturally can be? So I really enjoyed our time together, and I'd like to invite you in July. We have a free live training on how to tame your dragons of distraction, and I'd love for you to join me. I'll put the link in the show notes. So good to be with you today. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review where you listen to this podcast. And remember, if you'd like to tame your dragons of distraction so you get the most important things done, please join us in July for a free training.